I'm Dennis Johnson from Melville House, which is a sadly empty place right now. We're in the 8th week of the coronavirus lockdown here in New York City. And because I skipped the class on how to publish during a pandemic in publisher school, I've been reaching out during that time to friends and colleagues in the independent book world to find out how they're doing, also what they're doing, and maybe to pick up a little inspiration along the way. And I'm speaking with two of the leading lights of the indie book world today, two of my neighbors in Brooklyn. One is Johnny Temple of Akashic Books. The other is Jessica Stockton Bagnulo of the Greenlight Bookstore, my neighborhood bookstore. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for taking the time to speak. I just want to talk shop with you guys and give people some inside baseball about our new lives as independent book people. We'll start with you, Jessica. What has this done to your business?
It's a lot really fast, right? It's been a real reinvention over the past 6 or 8 weeks. Mid-March, I feel like there were a couple of days where we were like, do we need to consider closing? And then suddenly it was like, yes, you absolutely have to. And then you'd also need to send everyone home. And in that week of transition, I think March 21st, we closed the doors and walked away from the bookstores. And that was terrifying. We didn't know what was going to happen next. I feel like we were in a fortunate position that we've already had a really well-established website, an e-commerce website. So we're able to fulfill book orders online. There's a little while where we were trying to have people pick up curbside but we couldn't do that for very long. But we're able to have people order at greenlightbookstore.com and have them shipped from Ingram's warehouse, our wholesale supplier. So we can still fulfill those orders. And immediately we saw there were a lot of online orders. So we started shifting people over to that. And we're able to have some people have that for work. But we didn't have, we spent a couple of weeks trying to figure out how long this was going to last and what we were going to do. For a little while, we were paying people to stay home. But we're not a business that has the cash flow, or the reach or the resources to be able to do that for very long. So there was one really terrible day with a lot of crying where we had to lay off about 30 people, about 30 booksellers, because they worked on the sales floor and there's no sales floor. Like we didn't have any work for them. And some people are calling it furlough, and we absolutely hope that we can hire those people back, but we wanted to call it, unemployment, so that they could apply for benefits, right. So that they apply for unemployment so they could get, funds from the book industry, charitable foundation or whatever was available to them. Right. So it was a horrible, wrenching decision to have to make. But we felt like it was the best thing that we could do for our employees. Yeah. So then we had kind of a skeleton crew of people working, everybody from their home, mostly on fulfilling those e-commerce orders. And we were like, we better fulfill all of these now because they're going to dry up immediately. Right. But they didn't dry up. They've continued really sustainably, and it's actually kind of grown. So we have a team of maybe 6 people fulfilling online orders, just day after day, sending them direct to Ingram and getting them shipped out. And then the other thing that we had to do immediately is we canceled all of our events, obviously, like that was even before that we closed the store. And then very quickly had to try and figure out how to convert those to virtual events. But we were actually able to do that for almost everything in late March and April and May, what we had already scheduled. We were able to honor the bookings that we had and turn them into virtual events. So we're hosting events almost every night of the week on Zoom webinar. They're like live conversations that are like maybe an hour long, and people can log in and just view them and ask questions in the chat or whatever. And those have been really successful. It's been really fun.
So they're working.
They are kind of working. I mean, I think we're still trying to crack the nut of can we make those translate into book sales? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, but they definitely are a way for us to stay engaged with our community. And we're doing a lot of new things to do that. Since people can't come into the stores, we're like, how can we bring the stores to them? So we started a video series called Hand Selling from Home. It's like Rebecca and I and some of our staff talking about books that they love. We were able to have one manager be able to be in the store and say, so they do these Instagram stories where they just kind of walk around the store and show people what's on the shelves. We're doing tons of social media, as everybody does. We were able to actually hire some people back to do some digital marketing. And there is a ton of engagement, and people are still really supportive of independent bookstores. So, you know, our sales for April were down like 40%, but that's better than 90%.
Right.
And so and our payroll is much smaller than it was. So we're at a sort of precarious sustainability right now.
Wow.
And at the point where we're starting to like think about next steps. So it's really wild.
Yeah, hair raising.
Yeah.
We'll get to the next steps in a minute, but Johnny, what's your side of this? What's happening at your publishing house?
At Akashic, like all other book publishers and booksellers too, like what Jessica's been saying, you know, we've been really ramping up our social media, selling books direct, trying to be creative about things. It's been a big struggle. You know, sales are way down, but sort of like Jessica was saying, like down 40% is better than down 90%.
Yeah.
While that sounds obvious, it's like the difference between life and death for a small business. And so, you know, where treading water is sort of the best you can do. It's still early, quite frankly. I have like not looked too closely at our April numbers yet. Mm-hmm. I'll be doing that in the next week, but I've been kind of like not trying to face it too much, but it's been a real struggle. We had to let go of one staff person, and that was heartbreaking because he was dedicated to Akashic, doing great work. And it was just a matter of realizing, for me, it was a matter of, I had been kind of hoping that there was a way to make it through this situation without having to let go of any staff people. And we're not through it yet. So hopefully I'll get through it with only having let go of one person and not more, but it would be foolish to think that I know what's going to happen. Yeah. But my hope to get through without letting go of any staff people, I just sort of woke up one day and realized, even when we stop social distancing as much, we're going to be looking at a broken economy. And so we need to kind of like shrink down. And that was when I realized I had to let go of someone, was because our new reality is going to be a shrunken reality. I don't know how shrunken it's going to be. But that was, you know, it was just this sort of moment realizing it's not just a matter of getting through the next 2, 3, 4 months. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of, you know, getting through until our economy recovers. I don't know if we're talking about mid 2021, late 2021, early 2022, who the hell knows? And as both of you know, and as everyone watching knows, this is unfolding on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis for all of us. We don't know what June holds for us. All we know right now is what the first week of May holds for us.
Right. And I don't know about your warehouse, but our warehouse is not processing returns yet. That's the thing I'm trying to forecast. Everything.
So just to add on to what I've been saying, you know, and on the more positive level, we've been doing a bunch of exciting things with our social media and with our authors who have new books coming out. And there's definitely some positive developments happening. And in terms of positive developments, hearing what Jessica just said, I already feel 8% better than I did 10 minutes ago.
Excellent. I'm going to make her talk some more. Maybe we'll get that up to 16.
Yeah.
Listen, Jessica was talking about some of the new things she's doing, and I know she left some out that I want to hear about, but you're also doing some great stuff right now, particularly with your author interview series on the Akashic website.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for asking about that. I'm doing a weekly interview series with authors, both Akashic authors and non-Akashic authors. You know, these are sort of quarantine Q&As, we're calling them. And they're meant to be not overly serious. I'm trying to keep things light and mix humor in wherever possible. I had a very fun interview with T.R.E. Jones, an excellent interview with Jennifer Egan, Adam Mansbach, Ricardo Cortez. These are the interviews that I've already posted, and coming up very soon is an interview with Marlon James, which is outrageous and R-rated. The interview was actually done by my 12-year-old son in the case of Marlon. But we're getting a great response to these interviews, and we're doing other things as well, but that's perhaps the highlight.
Yeah.
Across our social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or that, the interview series is being housed across our social media.
Well, and I know you've been really ramping up your social media as well. How have you had to shift what people are doing, and what's it like having the staff working from home?
Yeah, it's confusing. It's sometimes exciting, often confusing. Everybody is, of course, working from home. I will say that my whole staff, I don't know that we've ever worked harder than we're working right now, because in addition to just all doing our jobs, we're also reinventing the wheel. It's kind of hilarious that every book publisher and every bookseller is simultaneously reinventing the wheel without being able to share notes too much. We are sharing notes, as you know, Dennis. We're in touch with you and other publishers, but nobody has that wheel already. So we're all doing the same work at the exact same time. It's been really difficult on all of us, particularly our publicity and promotion department, because we can't do regular book mailings. So promoting a book, instead of doing a mailing of 200 books, is one by one reaching out to different media sources. At the same time, my publicity department, which is Susanna Lawrence and Alice Wertheimer, in addition to doing all their work, we're also doing all this extra social media work. Yeah. So it's like an impossible amount of work for all of us, but particularly the publicity team.
Yeah, as if publicity wasn't hard enough in the first place.
Exactly. And as if they weren't, burning their candles at both ends to begin with. Right. But so I have an incredible staff, an incredibly dedicated staff, and I'm really lucky, and I'm running them ragged, which is hard, but it's a desperate time.
Right. Let's get back to some of the new stuff people are doing. Jessica, you're doing a lot of virtual events, as you've already described, but there's even more than that. I mean, you've got this thing coming with the 92nd Street Y that I think is just amazing. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, and we picked a Melville House book for one of our first selections.
I want to talk about it.
Yeah, and that was actually, it was. I think partnerships have always been really important to us, and even more so now. We're like, how can we sort of pool our resources and do something interesting? And the 92nd Street Y had reached out 3 or 4 months ago about, maybe partnering on a book club of some kind, or getting our signed first editions club to their book group subscribers or something like that. And obviously that kind of fell by the wayside. Then I circled back to them and was like, is there anything that would be interesting about this now? Is there any version of this that could exist? And they were like, actually, that would be amazing. The Y is intentionally trying to work with small businesses and independent bookstores. So they're doing, with us and with Kitchen Arts and Letters, they've started these virtual sort of subscription book clubs. So they wanted someone from Greenlight to lead the discussion, which would be a virtual discussion. Customers or attendees sign up for 4 of them in a row, and they pay a subscription price. It includes all 4 of the books. So they get the books sent to them, and then they get the login to go into this event and have a discussion led by, presumably somebody knowledgeable about the books. So Rebecca and I decided that we could do this if we split it up. So she's hosting 2 and I'm hosting 2. Mm-hmm. And the suggestion of the Y was what if we do something that's we can't go anywhere, but we can go anywhere we want with books. So we did this sort of global tour. So we picked your book that's set in Iran. There's a South American and a European and an Asian, I forget, but there's they're intentionally very international. And so that's kind of the theme that we came up with.
It's like a
And I,
travel book club.
what's that?
Like a travel book club.
It is kind of like a travel book club. And then they're doing this thing with Kitchen Arts and Letters where they're doing a cookbook club and doing sort of interactive cooking kind of classes along with the book thing. So I mean, that's great in terms of partnership. And I think it's also, you know, indicative of like the way that we're starting to think about how do these online events translate into book sales. And like the ticketed event idea is something that everybody's sort of trying to figure out. Like you were saying, Johnny, it's like everyone is reinventing the wheel at the same time, and you can't just like take someone else's best practices because everyone is figuring it out simultaneously. So, you know, we're talking to multiple different publishers who are trying to figure this out at the same time that we are. You know, what do we do with like these big events that we had booked at King's Theater and like we haven't refunded those tickets yet? Like, how do we create something that's worthwhile for people? Or do we just have to refund everything and start over again? Like we're figuring all of that out. But I think the 92nd Street Wise model is one that's going to work. Like they've seen a good response to it already. They have a really solid platform for that kind of thing, obviously. And so we're enthusiastic to see how it'll work out.
It's a fantastic project. I wish you well with it, and thank you for including a Melville House author. Johnny, are you publishing to the moment? How are you looking at acquisitions right now? Are you looking at things to address the moment specifically, or to somehow work with what's going on now? Is this impacting your acquisitions at all?
We've slowed our acquisitions way down. As I said, I'm trying to really shrink a little bit, not a lot, but to shrink a little bit. And so we publish about 40 books a year, and it'd be great to get that closer to more like 30, 35.
Right.
And so we're looking at very, very few new books right now. Having said that, we're a book publisher, so every day I'm looking at, people reaching out to us and
Are you getting more submissions than ever now? I am.
Really? No, we're actually,
right.
That's really interesting because we noticed that we're getting fewer, which suits us just fine. But one thing I will say is that we tend to not necessarily jump on books about highly topical things. I mean, there are exceptions on our list. We did a Tom Hayden book right when the Iraq War came out. But to me, the idea of books around COVID is, I'm really not drawn to this. I've been proposed like 16 anthologies, because Akashic has our famous noir series. And so these 7 different people have been like COVID noir. But our series is based around cities, it's not based on what's happening today. It's a city or geography based series. But I'm really perplexed at this idea that every fiction writer is experiencing COVID, and talk about all of the 3 of us reinventing the wheel. Every fiction writer is going through this traumatic experience, and I'm not looking forward to reading the fiction that comes out of COVID. And I'm personally not interested in books. Obviously, this is important, and our society needs to wrestle with this. And Akashic publishes fiction, nonfiction, art books, etc. But in terms of our beating heart, I always think of that as being literary fiction.
Right.
And I'm just worried about all these fiction writers being put through the same funnel.
2 words: lockdown memoir. That is our future, John. It's coming at you. Jessica, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think writers, a couple of writers that I've talked to at least, are having the same kind of reaction, like, I'm not looking to do that anytime soon. They're
but how can they avoid it? How can they avoid it?
They write from their life,
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it translates into some warped dreamlike form or something, but yeah, nobody wants to write it.
The great writers are, however it impacts them, it's going to be wonderful and amazing. Yeah. I'm more worried about the writers who aren't at that top tier literary level command of their voice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm worried about what mediocre writers are going to be doing with this.
It'll be like war novels. It's usually a few years after a war ends before you start seeing the fiction about it. Of course, now we're in wars that never end, but maybe it'll take a while before we start seeing how this really impacts fiction. Anyway, I think we'll see a lot of nonfiction pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's got to be. I mean, nonfiction. The world has to figure this thing out, and books are an incredible tool for people to try to figure out what the hell is going on.
Dennis, what is Melville House doing? You guys tend to have a really quick reaction to topical kinds of events. What are you working on?
We crashed a coronavirus book by a psychiatrist, and it was just about how to keep your head together during this. It was a very short little pamphlet, and we did it. We're giving all the proceeds from it to Bink. But it was just a book that an Irish publisher did that I read, and I just said, we've got to do this. It's just a beautiful little thing about just, don't panic, keep it together. You can do it. So that's what we crashed. But we are taking a step back and also doing fewer acquisitions and trying to think about what the nonfiction is going to be about this. And we have the same concerns about the fiction. I want to ask you though, Jessica, what's selling? Are you seeing trends? I mean, I'm sure you're selling a lot of children's lit because everybody's home with the kids now. But what else? And I also know that right now that is actually that is the biggest selling thing going on in our industry. But what else is moving? Are you seeing any trends?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I feel like we are selling a lot of children's books across the board, but there's not like any one big standout. It's like everything from classics to recent stuff. It's not about bestsellers. I think, and Rebecca is better at identifying these kinds of trends than I am. And Rebecca's my co-owner, who's the buyer for Greenlight. And we were talking the other day, and she, before this, we had been seeing such a shift towards nonfiction in the books that were really being talked about and the events that were working really well, because it was sort of like the world is so strange with, our political climate and whatever, everyone just needs to have the world explained to them. Now we're seeing a shift back to fiction. Yeah. Because so much nonfiction just doesn't seem that relevant right now. You're like, if you're not talking about this weird world, like, it doesn't seem relevant, but fiction always seems relevant and is somewhere else to go besides your own room. So that's been an interesting thing to watch. Like it had been a big nonfiction swing, and now it's swinging back the other way.
That is industry-wide, by the way. I've seen some pretty current stats on this. Nonfiction is way down, yeah. Fiction's up, front list is down, back list is up.
Yeah.
So that's nationwide. I don't know about,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the challenge for us, is to like make sure that we're putting the new titles out there, because we want authors to continue to have careers also, but backlist is easy to sell. Like the stuff that's familiar, and comfortable, like that's a lot of what's appealing at the moment.
I just bought this from Greenlight.
There you go. Neat backlist.
Lots of Harry Potter box sets, I'm hearing.
When I interviewed Marlon James, because he's writing fantasy now, he said, he talked about it being a good time to be a fantasy writer because he can just leave this world. Yeah. And then he talked about the psychological difficulty of stopping writing and then re-entering.
Yeah, I know. It's like coming back through the wardrobe. You're like, don't make me. But I've been recommending Ursula Le Guin's like the whole Earthsea collection. That's just like spend a couple weeks, in a different world.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. I've gone way longer than I meant to because you guys are just too interesting. But here's a last question for you both, which is what new thing are you doing to cope with your situation that you think you'll take into the bright future ahead of us, knock on wood? What will you keep?
I mean, I think virtual events are going to be around for a long time. I mean, I think even when we're able to get back into our store, we're not going to be hosting big gatherings for a lot longer. Right. And it seems like people are getting comfortable with this, and it actually opens up a lot of possibilities that we didn't even have before. Like geography is no obstacle to hosting an author. It's, the capacity is much less of an obstacle. We can host 500 people very easily on any given weeknight. And hopefully that evolves into something more interesting when we can, you know, actually send people signed books, or we can be streaming from our store or something like that. But I think that's something that's gonna stay. And we're also finding it super useful in bringing authors to schools. You know, we can have an author visit that's like, you know, 4 or 5 public elementary schools in Brooklyn are all getting to interact with this author on a given day, that we could never make that worth the author's time or our staff time or whatever to be able to do that if it was a physical traveling thing, but we can do it if it's virtual. So I'm hoping that we're able to translate that into, you know, increasing accessibility in some ways in a positive way for a while.
Yeah, that's great. I think Margaret Atwood kind of pioneered this. Didn't she do a virtual book tour way back when?
Yeah, I feel like people weren't ready for it then.
Yeah.
Now maybe people are ready for it.
Yeah, I hope so. How about you, Johnny? What are you doing now that's new that you think you'll continue doing after this is all over?
Along the lines of what Jessica said, you know, more virtual events with our authors, and like Jessica says, you can actually cover like a lot more ground. Like an author can now do a national tour in a way that was never before possible. And I'm not saying that that's easy to do, or that for an author you can set up a bunch of events and they're all going to be successful, but it's easier to swallow an unsuccessful event if only 8 people turn up and you haven't left your house. That's better than having traveled to some city to do a reading for 8 people.
Right.
But for me, also the main thing is just I'm really enjoying this author interview series that I'm doing, and right now I'm thinking I will, you know, continue doing it even when even after the quarantine is over, because it's really interesting to talk to people while they're in their own home, and it's COVID that sort of gave rise to this at Akashic. But you know, suddenly you realize, well, I can interview any author at any time, and there's this accessibility that was always there, but there's a different light shining on it now that may keep shining on it even after we're not social distancing anymore.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Thank you both for speaking with me today, and I really wish you nothing but the best for your really wonderful businesses. Good luck with this and stay safe.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thanks, Dennis, and thank you for hosting this, not just this conversation, but the other conversations you're doing. These conversations are needed and important, and I've learned a lot from this conversation already. And yeah, the 8% me feeling better has actually jumped to 16% based on what Jessica is saying, and also just getting to look at you, Dennis.
Job done, Johnny. Thank you both. Be well.
Bye.